The store was dying. No customers. No hope. Then one cold night, a stranger sat on a chair, and everything changed. The store had been open for months, but customers were rare, and that cold evening Michael Harris stood behind the counter, staring at the empty aisles, seriously thinking it might be time to close his business for good. The lights were on, the shelves were full, and everything looked exactly the way it should, yet nothing felt alive. He slowly walked between the aisles, straightening boxes that had already been straightened earlier that day. Outside, cars passed by and buses stopped, but inside the store, silence settled like dust. Michael had invested all his savings into this place. He believed that if you worked hard, stayed honest, and treated people fairly, success would come. But belief did not pay rent, and hope did not stop the bills from piling up. That night, the cold pressed hard against the glass windows, and the quiet inside the store felt heavier than usual. Michael checked the clock again and again, knowing no one else was coming. He thought about his family, his promises, and the fear of explaining failure. As he reached for his coat to close early, his eyes drifted toward the street outside. Across the road, at the bus stop, stood an old woman. She had been there longer than usual. She didn't walk around or complain. She simply stood still, holding her handbag tightly, as the wind cut through her thin coat. Her shoulders trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the cold. Michael told himself it wasn't his problem. Everyone had struggles. He had enough of his own. Still, something about her quiet patience stayed with him. He stood there for a moment longer, torn between closing the store and stepping outside again, unaware that this small decision was about to change everything. Michael finally picked up his keys, locked the door halfway, then stopped. He sighed, turned back, and unlocked it again. Without fully understanding why, he stepped outside into the cold night. The wind hit his face immediately, making him realize just how harsh the weather was. He crossed the street slowly and spoke to the woman in a calm, respectful voice, telling her she could wait inside the store until her bus arrived. The old woman looked surprised. Her first reaction was to refuse. She shook her head politely, clearly uncomfortable accepting help from a stranger. She didn't want to cause trouble or take advantage of kindness. But the cold was unforgiving, and after a moment, she quietly agreed. Her name was Margaret. She followed Michael inside, her steps careful, as if she were afraid of taking up too much space. Michael brought a wooden chair and placed it near the window, where the warmth from the heater reached best. Margaret sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap. She didn't ask for water, she didn't look around the store. She didn't speak unless spoken to. The heater hummed softly, and the store returned to silence. Michael went back behind the counter, pretending to organize papers, though his thoughts kept drifting toward the quiet woman sitting by the window. He checked the clock. 10 minutes passed. 15 minutes passed. The store remained empty. Outside, headlights finally appeared, and the bus pulled up to the stop. Margaret stood, adjusted her coat, and gave Michael a gentle smile. She thanked him softly and walked out into the night. Michael watched her leave, then locked the door behind her. He had no idea that as she walked away, Margaret whispered a quiet prayer in her heart, asking God to bring customers to the store and ease the burden of the man who had offered her warmth without expecting anything in return. Moments after Margaret left, the bell above the door rang. Michael looked up, surprised. A customer stepped inside, shaking snow from his jacket. Before Michael could fully process it, the bell rang again, then again. Within minutes, 3 customers stood in the aisles, browsing calmly, asking questions, filling baskets. The silence that had haunted the store for weeks was replaced with soft voices and movement. Michael felt his chest tighten, unsure if he was imagining things. Later that evening, just as he was starting to relax, a family walked in. The parents moved slowly through the aisles while the children laughed quietly, picking items and placing them into the cart. They did their full grocery shopping, filling the register with steady beeps Michael hadn't heard in days. When the last customer left and the door closed, Michael stood alone behind the counter, staring at the total on the screen. It was more than he had made in an entire week. He locked the door that night with a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't excitement alone, It was relief mixed with confusion. He told himself it was coincidence. Maybe the weather had pushed people inside. Maybe luck had finally turned. The next day, he opened the store as usual, still tired but slightly lighter. Evening came again, cold and quiet. As Michael wiped the counter, his eyes moved toward the window without thinking. Across the street, at the same bus stop, stood Margaret once more. She looked just as fragile, just as patient, waiting in the cold. Michael felt something stir inside him. He didn't analyze it. He simply unlocked the door, stepped outside, and invited her in again. Margaret hesitated longer this time, worried she was being a burden, but the warmth of the store slowly pulled her inside once more. Margaret sat on the same chair near the window, hands folded neatly, eyes lowered in quiet gratitude. She didn't speak much, and Michael didn't push conversation. He let the silence be comfortable. Minutes passed, the bus arrived, and Margaret stood to leave. As before, she thanked Michael softly and stepped back into the cold night. Once again, she prayed quietly in her heart, asking for the store to be filled, for Michael's worries to ease. This time, customers arrived even faster. People came steadily, one after another, filling baskets, chatting lightly, staying longer than usual. Michael moved behind the counter with purpose, greeting customers with a calm confidence he hadn't felt in months. When he finally closed the store that night and checked the register, the number stopped him completely. $7,000. He stared at the screen, then sat down heavily on a chair behind the counter. This was no small improvement, this was change. The next evening, when Margaret appeared again at the bus stop, Michael already knew what he would do. He invited her inside without hesitation. The pattern repeated: warmth, silence, a quiet prayer, then customers. That night, Michael didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply stood still, watching the door, his thoughts finally catching up to his experience. This was not coincidence. This was not luck. Somewhere between offering warmth and expecting nothing in return, something powerful had been set into motion. Michael understood now that success had arrived, not when he chased it, but when he helped someone else. That realization stayed with Michael long after Margaret stopped coming every evening. He began to see his store differently. It was no longer just a place to sell groceries. It was a place where people passed through with unseen struggles. From that day on, Michael changed the way he lived and worked. He helped neighbors who were short on money without making them feel small. He let people pay later when times were hard. He gave jobs to young people who needed a chance, even when it slowed him down. When money wasn't what someone needed, he gave time. He listened. He showed patience. Slowly, word spread. Not about prices or promotions, but about trust. People talked. They returned. New customers arrived because they felt welcome, not pressured. The store became busier, not overnight, but steadily. Michael became known in the neighborhood as someone who cared. Friends asked him why he worked so much when business was finally good. He smiled but didn't explain. He knew the truth was simple but powerful. Helping others had changed him first, and success followed naturally. He didn't help because he expected reward anymore. He helped because it felt right. Over time, Michael's reputation grew beyond the neighborhood. People across the city knew his name, not because he was rich, but because he was kind. Yet every evening, after locking the door, Michael always looked toward the chair by the window. The chair that once held a quiet woman who never asked for anything, but gave him a lesson that reshaped his life. Years passed, and the store continued to grow, but Michael never forgot the nights when it almost closed. He remembered the fear, the doubt, and the moment he chose to help, even when he felt he had nothing left. The chair by the window stayed there, untouched, a silent reminder. Sometimes it was empty, sometimes someone else sat there, waiting for a bus, warming up, resting for a moment. Michael never asked questions. He simply offered space. Some nights, he wondered where Margaret was, hoping she was safe, warm, and cared for. He never saw her again, but her presence remained. Michael understood now that not every blessing stays, some come only long enough to teach you something important. The store became a place where people felt seen, people lingered longer, talked more, and returned often. Michael's life outside the store changed, too. He volunteered. He donated quietly. He helped friends start businesses of their own. He understood that success was not something to protect selfishly, but something to share responsibly. His name became known throughout the city as someone dependable, generous, and fair. Yet he never thought of himself as special. He simply remembered the cold night, the warm chair, and the quiet prayer spoken without words. He learned that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness carry the greatest power. Not because they are seen, but because they are sincere.